This person has been a godfather to many startups in the Silicon Valley. But not only that, he was also a godfather to our conference. So I would like to welcome on stage Tim Draper. So the hype with Bitcoin and crypto is so serious nowadays that that's what we start our conference with, right? And we would like you, Tim, to talk about how you see Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is going to change this world, how it's going to influence the governments, people, their relationships. And I read that you got so passionate about Bitcoin that you put your own $19 million into this. So you claim that in about 10 years, Bitcoin will be 250,000 per Bitcoin.
Dollars per Bitcoin,
yeah. Did you hear all that?
But that's a combination of two things: Bitcoin going up and dollars going down.
Going down, okay. So let me say just a few words for those who don't know. Tim is a founding partner at Draper Associates. And Draper Fisher Jurvetson, venture capital, one of the oldest venture capital firms with over $5 billion under management. Tim invested in companies like Skype, Hotmail, Tesla, Coinbase, Box, Twilio, and many, many other companies, sort of the famous companies of the Silicon Valley. And for that, he was named at the Forbes Midas list. You know, the ancient Greek king Midas. Whatever he would touch, it would turn into gold. So that's Tim.
Should we try it?
Sure. Okay, so stage is yours.
Terrific. Anya, thank you very much, and thank you, SVOD. I love the idea of Silicon Valley open door. I think it's a clever idea, and it's good thinking, and it kind of leads me into where I want to go with this talk. So yeah, I got involved early with Hotmail and with Skype, and something I noticed was that slowly they were starting to dissolve geographic borders. And various leaders of various countries were trying to attract venture capital, entrepreneurs, businesses to their country. And it was sort of threw a switch in my brain that I thought, whoa, governments now have to compete for us, for the businesses of the world, the venture capital, for the entrepreneurship of the world. It's really kind of an exciting thought. Because they used to be monopolists. They controlled a certain piece of artificial borders were put around them, and they said, that's my land, and I will set the rules for everybody who's in my land. And all of a sudden they're saying, I need people, I need businesses in my land. How do I get them? Okay, so that's the first part. The next part of my thinking came from this wonderful Korean guy who came into my office, and he said, yeah, I live in Korea, and 40% of Koreans are playing this game. I said, 40%? He said, yeah, 40%. And it's a massively multiplayer game. I think it was called Legends, I'm not sure. And so he said, and so it's so important to all of us that I have hired a guy to be my avatar in the game when I'm away at work so that I can come back with more inventory or more powers or more whatever. And then I thought, wow, that's just, it seemed a little weird to me. And then he said, yeah, and then I just bought my son a sword for his birthday. cost me $40. And I said, I thought that was a non sequitur. I thought he was talking about something else, and then all of a sudden he was talking about a sword, and then he looked at me, and he saw that I didn't understand, and he said, no, this is a virtual sword. It's pixels on the screen, and that's what he wanted for his birthday. And I thought, wow, this is a big opportunity. This is back in 2002, 2003. I thought, wow, this is a big opportunity. So two things came to me then. One was that people were going to participate in a virtual world. That was part of it. And then that currency would move from the fiat world to the virtual world. And then I thought, well, currency will move inside that virtual world, and then it'll move back to the fiat world. And so I got very excited, and I kept thinking, well, gosh, who's going to come up with digital currency, and who's going to be, on the forefront there? And I was looking and looking and looking for investments in digital currency. And I thought, well, that's each of these various games would have some form of digital currency, but none of them were sort of making it so that it connected, so that there was an exchange for Farmville gold, for Zork platinum, or whatever. There wasn't an exchange, and I kept thinking, no, there's got to be something. And then it's also got to convert to the fiat world. And then Bitcoin came along. And I got so excited about Bitcoin. I said, oh my gosh, it's here. There is a virtual currency. There is a currency for the rest of us. And so I got jumping up and down, and I backed this company called CoinLab. And in backing CoinLab, I said, well, okay, can I take some money and buy some of this currency? And he said, yeah, but I can actually do it better for you. The Bitcoin was at about $6 a Bitcoin then. He said, but I can do better for you. I can get it for $4 a Bitcoin. And I said, well, that's terrific. And so he said, but we're going to have to mine it. And he explained how mining worked and how people use their computers to go in there and mine. And we're going to build an ASIC to do some mining. And we're going to be it's going to be much faster, and we're going to end up getting Bitcoin much cheaper. Well, a couple of things happened. One was he hired Butterfly Labs to build his ASIC. And anybody here from Butterfly Labs? Good. Because Butterfly Labs held on to the ASIC, mined Bitcoin with it, and we didn't get our ASIC for months and months and months while they were mining the Bitcoin, as Bitcoin went from $6 a Bitcoin all the way up to $36 a Bitcoin. Finally, we started mining some Bitcoin. We got the chip, finally started mining some Bitcoin. And so we got some Bitcoin. We were all excited and thinking, okay, we're getting some. And of course, it's 8 times what I thought it was going to be, the price. And then he said, and yeah, I said, well, where are we holding all this Bitcoin? And he said, oh, don't worry, it's in the biggest exchange, Bitcoin exchange in the world, something called Mt. Gox. And so then he's storing it there at Mt. Gox, and then Mt. Gox disappeared the money, and all the Bitcoin was gone. And we were going, what happened? And I thought, well, it was a great experiment. I'm a venture capitalist, and I know that sometimes you put the money to work, and it doesn't really pan out. And I thought, too bad. We really could have used a virtual currency. And I thought that was the end. Bitcoin will go to zero, nothing, no harm, no foul. Well, Bitcoin only dropped in price by about 10 or 15%. After the biggest exchange, like 60% market share, just disappeared all the money. And I thought, whoa, people really need this. This is really important. And I tried to to figure out where people were using it and why they needed it. And, of course, everybody was thinking, oh, it's the criminal element, or it's this, or, well, it turns out that the unbanked were using it. People who were not able to be banked. They had, let's say you're trying to open an account here at Wells Fargo, and you say, here's $20.33. Well, the Wells Fargo guy will be very polite, but he doesn't want your account because it's going to cost him $200 a year just to comply with all the stupid regulations we have for banks. And so those regulations have created an artificial limit, like an umbrella, where a whole bunch of people have to be unbanked because they don't have enough money to be banked. Anyway, this was an opportunity for people to participate in the world economy if they were unbanked. People were also using this to send money overseas to their families in the Philippines or in Mexico or in different places. It turns out that people were paying 16% to Western Union to do that. And all of a sudden, with Bitcoin, they could just do it instantaneously, and it started to move. And then people were starting to use it to buy things, to experiment with, and then I started to think, wait a second. What about some of these other people from other countries? And a guy, Sebastian Serrano, came and he participated in my son's sort of experimental Bitcoin accelerator. It's called Boost VC, but it was, like, at that time, very experimental. And he brought in and my son, Adam, brought in all the Bitcoin entrepreneurs sort of under one roof so that we could kind of understand what was going on and so that they could all talk to each other. And one of them, this Sebastian Serrano, said, okay, I've lived in Argentina all my life, and during that life, my family has lost its fortune completely 3 times. And I'm only 30 years old. So in effect, every 10 years, my family builds up a fortune and then loses it because of the whims of some government official or another, these political forces, these centralized centralized currencies, these currencies that are tied to the political whims of some government official or another. And they saw that, and he said, so I'm going to start this thing so that people can use Bitcoin instead of Argentinian pesos. And he went around and he started to build that up. And then later on, he created his own coin, Ripio, and it's become a big deal. He's become an enormous success in Argentina. But the same thing was true in Venezuela. The same thing's true in Nigeria. It's true in many, many countries of the world. I mean, it's true in America. It's true in Japan. It's true in all of these countries where the fiat currency is still tied to some political force or another that wants to control it all through some centralized bank. And all of a sudden, there's this decentralized currency that's frictionless, that's completely open to the world. It's tied to no single government, created by a guy who stayed anonymous all this time. Think about that. All these reporters in the world, and they still don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is. We have this amazing, whoever he is, gave us the most amazing gift. And that gift has now taken on all sorts of new forms. And that is so exciting for me, and it should be exciting for you. Think about this. governments have controlled you through their currency for all these years, and all of a sudden, we're starting to be freed of it. And now all the governments are trying to scramble and figure out, what do I do now? How do I get involved? How do I participate in this? Well, if you're a central bank, it's a little tricky because you're a central bank. And we're trying to create something that's decentralized and spreads throughout the world. So people go, oh, well, hey, how about a tethered coin, something tied to a fiat currency? And I look at them and I say, you're missing the whole point. This is global. It's decentralized. And now I'm going around and I'm meeting with, it's very interesting. All of these governments who are the smaller governments are now kind of thinking about this new thing. They can now punch above their weight. And here's how. I've got to put one more story into your head. The Prime Minister of Estonia came to Draper University to speak, and to our students and some of the Boost guys and a few others. And he said, just by instituting digital signatures, we saved 2% of our GDP. And I thought, wow, geez, 2%, that's like $1 trillion in America. And just like, actually it's a little less than that, but it's a lot. And just by instituting digital voting, all the young people started to vote. And then he said, and then we created digital identity, and the crime rate went down, and the business climate really improved. And then he said, and here, and he hands me, he said, you are now the 3rd virtual resident of Estonia. And I looked at the card, and I was there and looked at the card, and I thought, wow, what can I do with this? And he said, you can open a bank account anywhere in the EU, and you can buy real estate anywhere in the EU. And I thought, well, that's a start. But that's really great, and now I do have a bank account and all that. I don't have real estate there yet, but it got me thinking that governments now can be virtual, or at least a part of government can be virtual. So let's think about government now in 2 layers. There's one layer that's sort of tied to your city. It's the police and the fire and the people who decide where the buildings are allowed to go and all that stuff, right? But then there's this other part of government that is like your safety net. It's your welfare or your social security, your pension. It's your medical insurance. It's those kinds of things. Well, look, does it really matter where that comes from? Does that have to come from some centralized government? No. Estonia could start offering things like that now. And so we could all become virtual citizens of Estonia, and they could provide all of those government services that are not tied to the ground. And so what does that mean? All of these smaller countries can now compete for you. They have an opportunity now to compete for you. They can go, hey, we offer a better medical plan. Hey, we offer a better pension. And you, as a citizen of the world, can be like a consumer of government services. You can say, well, I'm going to take my pension, I'm going to do my Social Security in Chile, and then I'm going to do my medical insurance in Canada, and I'm going to do my technical education, virtual technical education in Russia. All these things can now happen for you. And it can be done with a government that is virtual on one level. But let's say the reason I've gone and I've met with all the prime ministers of many of these little countries is they are all saying, how do we do this? How do we become a Bitcoin government? How do we become a virtual government? And I kind of explained it's actually pretty easy. Bitcoin has evolved, and now there are a wide variety of currencies. There's something like 3,000 or 4,000, probably going to go to 30,000 different currencies. But with those currencies, there's the blockchain, which is this new technology that allows you, not so new anymore, allows you to keep a perfect ledger, so it keeps perfect track of data. So you can do governing much more effectively and more honestly than any given bureaucrat can do. And you have smart contracts, and so that you can actually have, you can set up contracts so that the checks all go out at the right time, but they won't be checks, they'll just be a transference of Bitcoin. And you can use artificial intelligence, you can actually change the entire medical establishment in a whole new way, because a lot of what medicine is or healthcare is information. And that information is going to get better and better and better as more of us have our data, our medical data. That medical data, think about what can go into the medical data of the world. It doesn't just have to be your medical results or your doctor's visits or your blood test results. It can include your Fitbit results or what you ate for breakfast or where you've traveled or where you're from or your genetic history or whatever. All those things can be combined and they can create a much better healthcare system for you. So this gives governments this amazing new opportunity to compete for you, because they can say, hey, we're Malta, we've got 500,000 people, I think that's about right, but we could have, and I told the Prime Minister of Malta this, and I said, you can have 1 billion Maltese. And his eyes lit up. 1 billion Maltese. Yeah, and they don't all have to live here. And he got very excited about that. I was talking to the Prime Minister of Kazakhstan. And apparently, by the way, Kazakh means free. And I said, oh my gosh, you guys have a one-time, unbelievable opportunity. And he said, to do what? And I said, okay, first of all, how many people come to Kazakhstan to visit every year? And he said, about 3 million. And I said, okay, you can get at least 3 million of them. You just, instead of having that guy at the border who says, visa, why don't you have a couple of very delightful young people who come up and greet you and say, welcome to Kazakhstan. You are Kazakh. You are free. And here, and hand them a passport and say, you can come to Kazakhstan anytime you want. Welcome to Kazakh. Come on in. We want you here, and you are now a virtual Kazakhstan citizen. And now you get 3 million a year that you just keep piling up, and you can just add more services, more government services, more opportunities. All can be virtual. This can change everything. All of a sudden, think about this. You're going to have, what are there, 240 countries out there? And you can create a new country. People are creating new countries now. And those new countries are potentially going to be the ones you use. It doesn't even have to be a country that has a land base. It can be a country that has just a bunch of computers in a satellite or something, or on the water. We have an amazing opportunity. I mean, right now, here's what I do for a living, right? I'm a venture capitalist. I look for industries where they're providing bad service at a high cost, because I think that's an opportunity for an entrepreneur to kind of wedge in there. So you can think about, well, what industries are providing the worst service at the highest cost? And everybody thinks, oh, the cable company or, you know, banks, venture capitalists, bad service, high cost. Investment banks, all of finance, insurance, healthcare, real estate. They're all providing pretty bad service at a high cost. Why? Because they're monopolies and oligopolies. Well, right now we've got the biggest industry in the world, and it keeps growing as a percentage of GDP. Government is providing the worst service at the highest cost. The US government is now spending more than 50% of the GDP of the US just for government. I don't know where it's going, but I don't feel like I'm getting half of my life and services out of my government. Same thing's true in Russia. I don't feel like Putin's doing like great things for all the Russians. And I don't think that that's happening in many countries at all. Now, Japan has woken up. Japan has said Bitcoin is a national currency, and ICOs are legal here, and here are the regulations, here's what you do if you want to do an ICO in this country. And it was very clear, and it wasn't tied to some old laws that they're from the 1940s, and then they're trying to manipulate those laws to make them make sense for this new world. I mean, our old laws from the 1940s are basically, and from Sarbanes-Oxley and all this regulation, are really set up for companies that have 100,000 people in them and are worth about $10 billion. Okay, that's what our laws are set up for. And they're trying to apply those laws to two guys and a dog starting an ICO. ICOs, IPOs are very different. So you have this really interesting time now where governments, and let's hope that the US government recognizes this, governments need to compete for you. They need to be thinking, how can I serve you? Actually, many years ago, my dad took me to a government office, and the guy behind the desk said, what can we do for you? How do we make your work life better? How do we make your home life better? How do we better educate your children? Has anybody had that happen in the last 30 years? No, it's usually like, have you filled out Form 12D? And no, you didn't fill it out properly. You need to cross your T, and otherwise we won't accept it, and then you can't, you know, walk, or you can't speak, or whatever. It's getting really heavy-handed all around the world, and we have a huge opportunity to transform governance and make it much, much better. And so with that, I leave you and let it kind of fester in your brains, and I hope you can do something with it. So thank you, SVOD, and thank you, Anya. I don't know if I have time for questions or it's time for the hook. Time for questions? Perfect. Any questions? Wait, before any questions, I got a question for you. How many of you have any kind of crypto? Good. Okay, those of you who don't, I don't want you to ever speak about crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, until you've done this. Spend $75, buy a ledger or some equivalent, plug it into your computer, download some crypto, and pull it off. You will suddenly have this free feeling. You'll feel like, I have money that is right here in my hand. I am not stuck putting it into that bank where that big banker who dresses well and uses all my money and builds those huge buildings. I don't need that guy. Okay, so that's your homework for today. Or go, you could just set up a Coinbase account. It kind of has the same effect. But there's something great about just like, here it is. Oh my gosh. You know, and then you pull it off the web and it's like, wow, this is really cool. And Bitcoin has never been hacked. And my bank account at Wells Fargo has been hacked and hacked and hacked. Wells Fargo is like playing whack-a-mole, trying to keep the hackers away. And Bitcoin's never been hacked. So you are more secure with your Bitcoin than you are with any other currency. And if you don't like whatever your government is doing, you can move across a border and still pull down the Bitcoin. Because I don't think they take rubles at this particular Starbucks here. You had a question.
So you're speaking about Bitcoin, but of the other thousands of currencies, they're only worth what people are willing to pay for them. So how does anybody know which ones have real value?
Okay, great. Great question. And I'll take it from a couple of different points of view. One is money. What is money? We used to trade shells, you know, and then we traded gold. And then it was sort of the promise of gold. And then it was like, here, I'll just write you an IOU. And then those weren't so secure. And so then it was the IOU that was the full faith and credit of the government. So somehow the government got involved. It was just gold for a while there. Well, now it's suddenly we've got something that is even more abstract and will create a wealthier world because it moves faster. It is much less friction. And with less friction, you have more liquidity, you have more liquidity creates more wealth. So that's all great. Now, what do I look for in a coin? That's what you're really getting at. What do I look for in a coin? I look pretty much the same way I've always looked at entrepreneurs. I'm looking for entrepreneurs that have a great vision for the future. Now, the coin is just another vehicle now because there are the corporations, and they're set up for the good of the shareholders. And then, you know, the consumers and all that. But set up for the good of the shareholders. Nonprofits are for the good of the community or society. The cryptos, how they're set up, and this is the best way I can describe it, they're a Kickstarter for societal transformation. So they're an opportunity. When you buy into a coin, buy into the belief behind the coin and buy into the entrepreneurs behind the coin. Because what you're trying to do with every coin that you get involved in is get involved in a movement. So there should be a woman's coin. There should be a feminist coin. There should be an eco coin. There probably is. There should be a coin for, just think in terms of a coin, and the coin's value will go up based on how many people recognize that coin as valuable. And that means how big is the network around that coin to the square. The equation is number of nodes in the network squared. So as more Bitcoin wallets are created, the value of Bitcoin's going up. As more people get involved with Ethereum or Bitcoin Cash or some of the smaller ones, Tezos and Bancor and Credo, as people get behind them, they become more valuable. So either get to know who's behind it, because you want that person not to just sort of jump into one, start it, sell a bunch of coins and leave. You want somebody who's saying, I have a maniacal mission in my head. And that's kind of the way I would look at it. The other thing is that some of these coins are just saying, hey, I'm going to do an ICO to like raise money for my company. And as much as I love the idea that my own industry is challenged by this, which I like, I actually do, I have to look at that and say, is that coin worth something to someone later in a secondary market? After you've done the ICO and all that, is it worth something? Does somebody want to pay for that coin? Who wants to buy that coin after the market? And if you don't have a good answer for all of those, then don't jump in. And if you just wanted to participate, I'd say there are two ways to do it. Well, there are probably three ways. One is just buy Bitcoin because that's not tied. There are only 21 million of them, so you might as well get one. And it's not tied to like a centralized source. It's not tied to an individual who's going to say, we're going to issue more. Almost all the other coins can go ahead and issue more. So that's what I look at. But then I'd invest in maybe you take the top 10 and put some money in, or you do them all in hopes that one of those becomes the Amazon and the Google and you put a little bit of money into all of it. That's kind of another strategy. Because if you had bought all of the .coms back in 1999, you would have lost your money in about 80% of them. But the other 20% ended up making you so much money because it was Google and Amazon and Facebook was later. Google, Amazon, Microsoft. There were some amazing, great companies that came out of that. So, short question, long answer. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Yes, excuse me. So, like I was reading criticism of bitcoins on purely technical grounds, and according to some analysis, the number of outstanding transactions which Bitcoin infrastructure can handle is multiple order of magnitude less the number of outstanding transactions which can be handled by Visa, MasterCard, and so on. So this practically means that there is absolutely no way, technically, to use Bitcoin as a payment system. So you still need money and Visa and MasterCard and so on. So, and two questions. First, is there any cryptocurrency which can be used instead of like a regular payment system? This is number one. And like second, in this case, Bitcoins are not really coins. It's sort of an investment vehicle, but not a substitute of money. So what is your comment on that?
Okay, this is great. First, he said something can't be done. And whenever that happens, usually 90% of the people just kind of nod their head and say, oh, it can't be done, because they're thinking of what's going on right now. But then that 10% that are engineers look and go, oh, there's an opportunity for me. How do I make it go faster? How do I make it more interesting? And you're seeing all sorts of new technologies come out of all these coins. From these 3,000 coins, many of them have new technologies, and many of them have technologies for speeding up transactions. And those are coming. But it's interesting that Bitcoin had that problem, and the Lightning Network suddenly appeared, and Lightning Network is still not as fast as a Visa or MasterCard transfer, but it's about 1/3 the speed. I suspect another engineer is going to be able to make it even faster, but it is certainly fast enough for the number of people who have wallets to go ahead and buy Starbucks, and it will work. And the other part of your question is sort of like, because it's easy to listen to the news and say, oh, it's not working, or it's not working for me right now, and sort of give up on it. But then if you project out and you see that all of these technologies continue to change, and Moore's law continues, and there are more and more people doing engineering work around Bitcoin, the blockchain, smart contracts, artificial intelligence. As they work, they're going to make all of our lives much easier, and you won't even notice when all of a sudden you're paying with Bitcoin and you didn't even know that it had happened. By the time you're actually doing it, you won't even notice how it happened. But that's what a great engineer does. They create something like that, and it takes time. And so I'm always thinking, I mean, as a venture capitalist, I can't watch the news without like having my blood boil. So I don't really watch it. All I see are entrepreneurs and engineers who are trying to create a better future. And so I get this projection of what could be happening in the future. And that projection is maybe 5 to 15 years out. And that's what I'm seeing, 5 to 15 years out. And I believe in my heart and soul that all of this is going to happen. And I just feel like, oh, yeah. And in this case, I kind of feel with the government piece, I feel it's almost my obligation to say, it's coming, let's think about it, let's get people, let's improve ourselves, let's make sure that our governments are ready for it and make our lives better. So I mean, if you ask me like what happened today in the news, I would have no idea, and if I only lived today, I would be saying the same thing you are, which is, why would I ever want this? I can't spend it today at Starbucks. Although you can in some places. There's a Kentucky Fried Barrel that's the Bitcoin barrel that you can buy, or a few other things. You can buy a yacht or a house or big things. And it is coming, but it's not there for you right now. But engineers and entrepreneurs, that's what I've made my life on. They change things. Things change. We didn't used to be able to communicate with this like very simple device. I mean, I can push a button and get food. I can push a button and get a car to come pick me up and take me somewhere. I can push a button to do. None of that was possible 10 years ago. None of it. In fact, even the ability to communicate. I mean, I remember working where our telephone was our vehicle, and it was a landline, and it was not a cell phone. And that was where the beginning of my career was. The world progresses. People are moving much faster, and what's interesting is my generation's kind of going, yeah, patriotism, whatever. The younger generation, the millennials, are saying, yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I kind of like these cryptocurrencies because I'm in fiat currency debt because of the education system, and they didn't really train me to get a job anyway. And I like the people who I've met that are from other countries. So I don't understand why your generation is trying to have one country fight against another when I believe there are no geographic borders that should separate us. And I think they may have a point. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, team.